I thought I'd start talking to high school health and psychology classes. And at the end of my talk, I would have anybody who wanted to come up and talk about what they were going through. They would come up and one by one. And believe me, not a lot of them came because they were too ashamed, but some did. And this first girl I remember came up and said, oh, she was the star athlete, number one in her class, exceptionally good looking. And she says, I can't take it anymore. Everybody expects me to be the best at everything. My parents tell me I better get into the elite college somewhere in the Ivy Leagues or whatever. And I just can't go on. She had everything going for her on the outside, but was crushed on the inside. A while after that, another girl came up, and she was just an ordinary girl. She wasn't at the top of the class, but she was doing okay. She said, nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I have no friends. My parents hate me. I want to run away.
Today I get to speak to a very special man who is in his 70s and is sharing his journey with bipolar in the hope his story can help others recognize the signs and seek the help they need. Though most of all, it is an incredible journey of hope and getting through 50 plus years of being on a roller coaster. In fact, his book is entitled Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey. This is such an inspiring journey of overcoming and the beautiful support and love of his wife who stuck by his side through it all. A note though, the story is open, honest and confronting and deals with sensitive topics which include sexual abuse, suicidal ideation and other aspects of trauma, which may serve as triggers for you, so please exercise discretion listening to this and ensure you reach out for the support of family, friends, or professional services if you feel the need to. Thank you from my heart for listening. Steve, I'd like to welcome you to the beautiful side of grief. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you today about a very important issue.
Thank you.
I would like to start with some background on you. Who is Steve Wilson?
Well, going back, I'm 74 years old.
Yeah.
75 now. I just had a birthday. Sorry about that. I've been married for 51 years. I've got 3 daughters and 2 granddaughters. I was in the custom clothing business for 50 years. I'm now retired, originally from Delaware, Ohio, now living in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a beautiful day today, about 85, sun shining, going swimming after this.
Oh, wonderful. You're 75. You've written
Yes.
a book. You've been on a number of podcasts. Why are you doing this now when you could be going swimming instead? What is driving you?
To tell you the truth, I got really better over my bipolar disorder in about 2000. And to recap just briefly what happened to me in my younger years, I was sexually assaulted when I was 9 years old. That, I think, resulted in me going into bipolar disorder, which was diagnosed in 78. So I went through my whole life battling bipolar up until about the year 2000 when I got my last medication that formed my cocktail, and I've been better ever since. I 17 or 18, I still had a few lingering question marks in my mind that had been bugging me for 40 or 50 years. And they were quite harassing me. And so I decided to go to a trauma therapist. And I found one here in Scottsdale. And she took me back from my earliest memory through my entire life. And when we got done, there's so much in my life that I never would think about until I went through this exercise, and I decided to write a book about it. The main reason I wrote the book is a couple things. One, to try to ease the stigma against mental health. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. People think that anybody with a mental illness is either faking it, or he's just lazy, or he's really crazy and should be locked up. The second reason I wrote it was because I'm proof that if you're diligent about your progress, you follow the instructions you're given as far as how to beat this disorder. There's no cure, by the way. So what you can hope for is to put it in remission. I was able to do that. And that's what took place in the year 2000. And in 2015, I started facilitating 2 mental health support groups here in the Phoenix area. And after 8 years of doing that, I realized that this world is in trouble with mental illness because it's not being treated properly or not treated at all. The governments don't seem to want to do much about it. They figure if they can't see it, it's not there. So I've done a lot of podcasts. I've written a book, and I'm trying to get the word out that, hey, you people ought to realize that it's just as bad as if you have a heart attack, if you're mentally ill, and things should be done about it.
Look, I'm really grateful that you're sharing this now and taking that stand to raise awareness for this, because I agree with you 100% in that there shouldn't be a stigma around mental health. And in fact, a lot of our mental health creates diseases that we have that manifest later on in life. Anyway, let's go back to when you were 9, because I there is something there about what you said about the event that happened to you. Throughout your journey, it took a long time for you to actually bring that up with anyone. So you were just suppressing that for many years, and that's a really difficult thing to do. And then when you did bring it up with your doctors, they basically just passed over it and didn't actually give it any time, didn't actually find out how that had affected you, what had gone on. And like you say, you believe that's a basis for your bipolar. So let's just take a look at that a bit more, because in all the time you've been working with these support groups, you've found something very interesting with them, haven't you? You found about 80% of them track back to what?
If you really want me to go back to the age 9, I'll be glad to, because I was picked out of a line waiting for a Coke at a movie theater. Guy came up and paid for my Coke and then said, "Would you help me?" He took me into the restroom and he molested me. My thoughts on that at the time were, what the hell just happened? I never even knew something like that could be done. Did I do something wrong? Did I look like I wanted to be taken advantage of? And in 1958, it wasn't like today when they have things like stranger danger. Never even entered my mind that that could happen. But I did feel guilty. I figured it must be my fault.
Yeah.
So I vowed to never tell anybody, and I didn't for 30 years. Kept it all within me.
That's a long time.
Pardon me, a long time.
Long time.
Well, the real disaster about it is that on the day that I decided to tell my psychiatrist, who I'd been with for 10 or 15 years, he ignored it, acted like it didn't happen or that I was lying. And then it happened again with a different lady who was a therapist, a friend of mine, and she didn't believe me.
Why do you suppose they didn't believe you?
I have no idea. That was probably 1985 or something, the first instance. I don't know. I was dumbfounded and didn't know what to say, and so I said nothing. And it just caught me off guard. And he never brought it up again. I went to him another, I don't know how many, I don't know why I didn't fire the guy. He was a good friend of mine, but I should have gotten rid of him. So anyway, that took place. And what it did was to prolong the agony for until 2000, for another 15 years. And on top of that, I still never told anybody until I told my wife in 2015. So I kept it a secret for almost 50 years, other than those two incidents.
You have a very special relationship with your wife,
Yes.
Leni, and she's been there through thick and thin, through everything you've experienced. Why did it take you so long to tell her?
I have no idea. And I'm gonna tell you something that is really true in that I never thought of the rape again until I told that first psychiatrist and the second psychiatrist. I didn't think about it before, and I didn't think about it until I decided to tell my wife. It was not on my mind because I never linked it to my bipolar disorder.
Ah, interesting. Yet, doing the support groups that you've been doing for 8
Hmm.
years, 8 odd years, you found that about 85%, is that correct? About 85% of the people that you're dealing with in these groups, they track back to some sort of physical or sexual abuse?
Uh, that percentage is probably too high. I never said 85%. I think what I said was a high percentage, but that may be 20, 50. Have no idea.
Oh, okay,
If
but
it's
it is
20% at
significant.
the low
Yeah.
end, it's a lot.
Yes.
And most of those people are either at a young age sexually assaulted or physically beaten or mentally punished by a parent or somebody who just degrades them all the time, tells them they're worthless. And that's just as damaging as being beaten.
And in effect, that's what you had within your own family, wasn't it? Because your dad, you had such a tough time with your dad, and your mum had her own issues,
Right,
and you didn't really know your brother until later in life.
right.
And so you really didn't have anybody around you that you could confide in, did you?
No, and what I ended up doing was I faked it all the time. You
Yes.
put on this mask like everything is all right. And I was a jokester. I screwed around at school and had what everybody thought was fun, but on the inside, I was exploding.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of energy to keep those masks on, doesn't it? Because
Yes.
constantly you're going through every scenario in your head and thinking every which way about it. And so that takes a dreadful toll, doesn't it? What was
Yes.
that
And
like for you?
another
Yeah.
problem is I couldn't sleep. So not only was I tired mentally, I was tired physically. Although I could play sports and things, I was never able to give it my all. I was just too tired.
Yeah. And you were, in fact, a good golfer. And that surprised me when I was reading about you, because to be a good golfer, you actually have to have good control of your mind, don't you?
But I will
Yeah.
say that when I was a good golfer, and I was shooting in the mid to low 70s most of the time, I was in better shape up until another incident happened. when I was a junior, and we were fighting to become part of the State of Ohio Golf Championship, and not because of anything I did, but I cheated so we would win. And because of my bipolar, that ended my golf career.
So it
And
was cheating by omission, though, wasn't it? Because you actually knew what your score was, but somebody
right,
had recorded it differently, and
yes,
you chose not to say anything.
I might as well have done it myself because that affected me more than anything I can ever think of. See, it was my life. My lifelong dream was to be in the golf business, and I
Yes.
committed a sin in as far as golf world is concerned. I cheated, didn't record my score correctly. That was the end of golf.
It says a lot about you as a person, the type of person you are, because other people would go through life and just dismiss it and say, okay, great, I got away with that. But for you, it was that immense guilt that you felt around it. And that did, in fact, impact your golfing career and something that you loved to do. Let's also take a look because from the age of 9, you also experienced a lot of suicide ideation, didn't you?
Yes.
And how did you manage this over the years? And did you eventually reach a stage where that no longer impacted your thoughts?
Yeah, in fact, that the period of my life that was filled with suicidal ideations was very short. When I graduated from college and got back home to Ohio, had no job and missed my girlfriend and all that. That's when I fell into my deepest depression. And for a span of about a month, I was very much engulfed in suicidal ideations and the thought of taking my own life. But I never tried. But anyway, I got in a fight with my father at a barbecue. And because of that fight and my desire to hurt him badly, I went into the hospital.
And
Still
that was
with suicide. Go ahead.
no, was that the first time you'd actually sought help with this condition, with these thoughts?
Yes. They would manifest themselves. I was also a swimmer, been swimming all my life. And it started that when I would swim laps, every lap I would go, I want to kill myself.
Mm.
That's the first way it emerged. And then I just couldn't stop it. So I went into the hospital, and this hospital believed in the fact that you should have hard work, therapy, and medication. The medication part was a joke back then because there weren't very many medications.
Hmm.
But I did get one that helped enough so the suicidal ideations went away. And seriously, they never came back. Now, I wasn't on that medication for very long, but it did enough to help me in that regard.
Gosh, that must have been a huge relief for you just to
Yeah, just
know
stopped.
that you had something that,
Yeah.
because that must have been a crazy time living with that within your head at a time where you certainly didn't talk about those types of things. Again, that must have just added to all the pressure you were under.
I had absolutely no support group except for my psychiatrist and the people at the hospital. And it wasn't all their fault. They didn't know what I was going through, but they missed all the signals. I was a case right out of the books, down in the dumps, hated myself, couldn't get out of bed, didn't eat much, didn't sleep much. Somebody should have known that something was wrong, but nobody did until my mother figured it out just before I went into the hospital.
And you also went to the extreme of breaking your finger to get out of
Yeah,
playing
that was,
football because you didn't want to be in the dressing rooms with all these guys in a crowded situation. That is extreme.
well, and I at the time didn't tie it back to the rape, But what happened was I went out for football, and I also didn't like it. So maybe it wouldn't have happened if I really enjoyed football, but I didn't like it. But I was sitting naked in the locker room, and I thought, Jesus, what am I doing here? All these naked guys. It went back to the rape, but I didn't really associate it.
Mm.
I quit that year and didn't go back. I didn't leave the team, but I never went to practice. And then my mother made me go out when I was a freshman, and it was even worse. So one day we were throwing a football in my backyard, and it dislocated my finger. And I thought, maybe I can do something about this to get out of football. So I went up to my room and grabbed my finger and busted it. Just pulled it as hard as I could, and it got me out of football.
Oh,
And it hurt like hell, but all I felt was relief that I didn't have to play
relief,
football
yes.
anymore.
Yeah. So you went through these bouts of depression. When did you understand that it wasn't, in fact, depression on its own? It was a form of bipolar. And I didn't realize until I read your book that there were two forms of.
Yeah, there's bipolar 1, which is highlighted by a very high and an intensive mania on the part of the person. They'll go into depression or they'll be okay, but something triggers them and they get a feeling that they can do everything right. They can make millions of dollars. They can write the spellbinding book that everybody's going to love. They spend all their money. They ruin their relationships, and then they crash. Now, the episode may last a month, a year, 2 years, 6 months. There's no rhyme or reason for it. But when they come down, more often than not, they've ruined their normal life and that of other people. I never had. That's bipolar 1. I am bipolar 2. Bipolar 2 is the opposite. Deep depression on a cycle, a time cycle that can mean I was really depressed for a month and then I'd feel all right. Then I'd go back into depression and it would be deep again, and then I'd get okay for 3 or 4 months. And instead of going into a high mania, I would go into what's called hypomania, which is on the level between whatever we call normal and the high mania. So it's still more manic than it is depressive. To tell you what happened, when I was in hypomania, I took my wife out to buy her a new car. And we were sitting in the dealership, and I looked over and I saw another car, and I said, I'll take that one too. So
Oh, so it affected your decision making, feeling
definitely,
like, yeah,
I'll tell you
yeah.
what, one of the big things about bipolar is, 1, you can't make a decision worth a damn. And 2, you're so impulsive that you just do things without even thinking about them. And then there's the
And
rumination
mm,
when you get something in your head. Supposing you said something nasty to a friend of yours. Most people would go, all right, I didn't mean it, and I'm sorry. Well, what somebody with bipolar does is run it like a speed reel through their head for weeks and months, and they can't get it out of their mind, and then they add something else. So you're on this constant treadmill. It's all in your mind.
yeah. So you shared a lot of these when you were feeling like this with your wife. You shared these events with your wife.
Mhm.
What was her reaction? How does she support you?
Again, you have to realize that it's not constant. It's up and down like a yo or a roller coaster. When I was really bad, she would just hold me.
Oh,
When I went
beautiful.
off of, there's a section in the book about a doctor I got involved with who had me throw all my medications away and go on this super drug. And when I did that, I went into a terrible withdrawal. And she was there for me, held me during the night. It lasted about 2 days. And that's what she did. She didn't complain, although the first, we got married in 72, and that was the year that they diagnosed me as clinically depressed. And they gave me these medications, and none of them worked. And that's when I was really bad. And then in 78, 6 years later, the psychiatrist comes in and says, I may have made a mistake. I think you're bipolar. I said, means nothing to me, but it was going to get me better. And as soon as they put me on lithium, I got 50% better. And that's what turned my life around until 2000 when I got the last pill. So she was always there for me.
Yeah, she sounds like an absolute angel, honestly.
Don't tell her that. She'll get a big head.
To me, it's just such a beautiful love story, because to have somebody who is just so supportive by your side through this roller coaster ride that you were on is really testament to the beautiful soul
And
they are.
I'll tell you what, there's more to it than that. And it does come out in the book that my wife is Jewish. I'm really nothing. And my parents they're both gone now. They were against Jews. And that made it very tough for my wife. But she still stuck with me all the time. And she had problems with my sister, who was ultra right-wing religious. And so I can't believe she stuck with me because of all the pressure they put on her. But she did.
She must have seen something beautiful in you to make it worth her.
Yeah, so does everybody
by your
else.
side. All right, Steve, let's talk about the trust required in a therapist, counselor, or whomever you decide to place your trust in.
I didn't get the understanding of what it is to have a therapist relationship until I was in my groups. I knew what I went through. I knew that he had let me down when I tried to tell him about my rape. But he was the only guy I knew until he died, and then a couple more came along, that idiot who threw away my pills and somebody else. But when I got into my groups, and we're a very close-knit group that has people coming and going, new people all the time, can handle about 15 people at a session. But to hear their horror stories, it is really bad out there for people. If you don't have, and I was lucky enough, I am from a pretty well-off family, but if you don't have enough funds to pay for yourself, because insurance, just to put it easily, sucks for mental health. They don't want to pay a dime. They've used it as a scapegoat to get out of it for years, starting when I had my first long-term health insurance. And the first thing it said was mental health excluded from this. So that was back in the early. Insurance has ruined the mental health profession. My guys, now, I would say I've seen over 1,000 people in these years, and probably 80% of them, 70% of them are in that group that makes a good living, meaning, I don't know what. They're getting by. And then the ones who are on disability and so on. The problem is that there's just not enough psychiatrists and therapists out there anymore, and they're dwindling in number. They can't make a good living. Now, that's not to say every therapist can't, but the really ones who have a good following with people who can afford their services, they can do very well. But anybody who's young or not that well established is going to really suffer with the way the system is because they can't make enough money. So these people who were on the lower end of the wage scale are left out the cold. They can get disability and they can become SMI. You know what SMI is?
No.
Severely mentally ill. Hell of a stigma to put on you, isn't it?
Yeah.
They can go to clinics. The clinics are overwhelmed with people. You might be in distress and you finally get in to see a therapist. You're really hurting, and they go, the next time I can see is a month or two from now. What do they do when they're really bad and they've got nowhere to go to? That's why groups exist, because we can hopefully keep these people by giving them a little feeling of they're not alone and a little camaraderie. But it's really tough for them, really tough. And there's 20% of the people around the world have some type of mental illness.
That's a
It isn't
huge
just
number.
50 people in a town. It's 20% of every town.
Yeah.
Now, every doctor, every politician, everybody who's was involved sees mental illness as, no big deal. They'll come to the aid of a guy who falls down in the park, breaks his leg. Man, they'll be there in 15 seconds. But if a guy says, I'm mentally ill, and people can't see it and understand what it is, they have to suffer however they can suffer.
It's put in the
If
too
you,
hard basket, isn't it?
yeah, it's pretty bad. And it's not just the United States. I'm sure it's in New
It's
Zealand
everywhere.
too, and every place else I can think of. I've talked
Yes,
to people in England and Jamaica and Canada, other places in Europe, and it's the same everywhere.
absolutely. The other thing that I think people don't always realize is that you wrote in your book that when you're dealing with some of the people in your groups, you're seeing people who are supposedly high achievers. They look like they're doing really well, making the grades, they're athletic, they're popular and all that.
Right.
But that in itself is placing a huge burden on some of these kids, isn't it?
I started talking in about 1995. Now, I'll tell you why. And this was because of teenage suicides that I witnessed in my life. Didn't physically witness them, but they were people in my life. And they were two teenagers. One girl was working for me, and I had a clothing store. And at Christmas time, I'd hire a couple young ladies, junior high school, to come in and wrap packages and run errands because we were too busy to get them done. And I hired this one girl. She was energetic. She was good looking. She was an athlete. She had everything going for her. I went into the store one Saturday morning and I met her best friend at the back door who also worked for us, and she was crying. And I said, "What the hell is wrong?" She says, "Angie pulled a gun out last night and shot herself in the head."
Oh.
And just before that, a friend of mine and Angie was like 16. A friend of mine from college, his son got real depressed and got caught breaking into a house. The police called his parents and said, "You better come down and get him." And as he got out of the squad car, he looked at his parents and said, "Mom and Dad, I love you, but I can't take it anymore." And he shot himself in the head. I started having gone through this kind of stuff myself. I thought I'd start talking to high school health and psychology classes. And at the end of my talk, I would have anybody who wanted to come up and talk about what they were going through. They would come up and one by one. And believe me, not a lot of them came because they were too ashamed, but some did. And this first girl I remember came up and said, "Oh, she was the star athlete, number one in her class, exceptionally good looking. And she says, I can't take it anymore. Everybody expects me to be the best at everything. My parents tell me I better get into the elite college somewhere in the Ivy Leagues or whatever. And I just can't go on. She had everything going for her on the outside, but was crushed on the inside. A while after that, another girl came up, and she was just an ordinary girl. She wasn't at the top of the class, but she was doing okay. She said, nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I have no friends. My parents hate me. I want to run away. I want to die. And that's the kind of stuff I would hear from these kids. Everybody thinks that the teenage years are the greatest. These kids are suffering more than you can imagine.
Oh, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yes, it is very heartbreaking.
You experienced something within your own family, didn't you, with your 3 daughters? And one of your daughters was very good at gymnastics, and she felt the pressure of working at or performing at that level.
Yes, she was 18 when she quit gymnastics. Just prior to that, she had won a national gymnastics championship that was in Niagara Falls, New York, on the balance beam. She was exceptional on the balance beam and on the floor. But she had to go to practice 6 days a week. She didn't have time for her friends at our hometown. They practiced relentlessly for 3 and 4 hours a day. The coaches yelled at them. They have to repeat things over and over again until they got it right. And as far as the coaches were concerned, it was never right, so do it again. And it just got her. She started at age 6. So you think 13, that's not too old. She'd been in it 7 years. She just couldn't take it anymore. So she quit and never looked back. And her getting out was probably the best thing that ever happened to her.
How did you deal with the mental health issues that you recognized with your 3 daughters? Because each of them presented in slightly different ways. But you felt guilty about that. But I think it was an advantage that you had gone through what you had, because then you were able to recognize it in them and support them. So share with us about that.
That's very true. And I always kick myself in the ass because of this, but my oldest daughter was about somewhere between 8 and 10, and she was very depressed and moping around. And I got mad at her. And then I realized, wait a minute, why am I mad at her? I know exactly what she's going through. But at the time, I didn't want her to go through it. And I was so worried that she'd have to put up with what I've put up with all my life. So we got over that, and she got better through therapy. I don't know what kind of medication she was on, but she got a lot better. My middle daughter, my oldest daughter is Jamie. My middle daughter is Carrie. And Carrie never let on how bad she was until after the gymnastics thing. So that was 10, 12 years, whatever. And then when she had her first baby, she had an attack of postpartum depression that was really deep. And we didn't know that because we didn't live with her at the time. And she was just going crazy. I don't know how close she got to hurting her child, but it wasn't too far off. So she got through that, and she continues to be on medication today, but she's doing pretty well. And then my other daughter, Casey, her mental illness comes out in anger. But we don't see that very often because they live out here in Phoenix, about a half hour away, but we no longer see it, but we did when she was younger. So what I'm saying is, and I think what your point is, that it can easily get transferred from one era to the next.
Yes.
And continues on. And the reason I really believe that is because in my past, I had a guy in the 1800s who was somehow related to us. I don't know if that means he was a great grandfather or what, but he hanged himself in a barn. And then my mother's grandmother, I believe it was her, was in a mental institution for the last 20 years of her life. And then my mother had her own problems. And so it's just a continuing cycle.
Yeah.
And I've heard it happening in many other families too.
Yeah, especially when there are no obvious triggers there,
Yeah.
and then it just manifests itself. And I'm a great believer in that as well. I think it's influenced by genetics and also epigenetics, circumstances that happen that may turn it on, where otherwise it may have stayed dormant, which was probably the case with you. You got the double dose of it and had to deal with that. Now, you also had the tragedy of one of your beautiful girls passing away, didn't you?
Yes, it was Jamie, our oldest. She got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2018 and died in 2020. I hope nobody else ever has to go through it. It was 2 years of watching her go from a very good tennis player and a coach and a teacher to where there was hardly anything left of her. And was really tough. But what it did for us was, you hear so often about when a child dies, the couple can't go on together anymore. But in our case, it really strengthened our relationship, including the other two kids. So at least it worked that way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful outcome of something so tragic. Yes. Yeah. And how else did you manage the grief?
I think one of the things I realized over the years is that because I was medicated, many times the medication that you're put on eliminates your emotions. So it's like if something tragic happens, I know it happened, but I don't feel it. So because of the medication I've always been on, I don't react the way a normal person would react. So that made it easier on me while it was so tough on everybody else. It's a tough way to go no matter what. And one of the things we're able to do, my wife and I, several other people have had a child die over the years, and we tell them it'll get better. You'll get better, because we did. But you do that on your own timetable.
Mm. Yeah, that's with me as well. My daughter's been gone since 2017. And yeah, there are times days I have, not too many, fortunately, but days where, I feel that hurt. But for the most part, I just treasure the memories that she gave me and the beautiful person that she was for those.
That's the same way with our daughter. She was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, what are the key messages that you would like listeners to know who may be on a similar journey to what you've experienced yourself?
Out there, the problem is a lot of people don't seek help because they think there's nothing wrong with them, or they think nothing can be done to help them, or they go to get help. They find a therapist or psychiatrist, and they're put on medication. They're told right from the beginning that it takes a couple months for it to start working. When it doesn't work in a couple of weeks, they stop taking it. And that's their pattern that continues all the time. Another thing it can happen, and then they get bad again and go through the same process. Another thing that they do is they get a psychiatrist, they get their medication, they start feeling good.
Mm.
So what happens? They go, I don't need my medication anymore. I feel good.
Mm.
And they throw it away. And then 2 months later, they're back in the toilet. I feel, the only time I ever threw my medication away was under the direction of that doctor. I would never have done it otherwise.
And that was not a good experience for you.
No, it was one of the worst of the whole time I was there. And then there's the people who just won't do anything that they're told. They just don't do anything. You give them these directions and you tell them there's no cure, but this can help you get your life back. They don't do anything. So that's a big obstacle. And then, of course, you got the obstacle with the cost and the availability and their struggle. Now, there is another thing that is very important and most people don't know. The medication only helps about 50% of the patients. It is not everybody who can benefit from medication. You think it's the first line of defense. Start out with 50%, you're not in good shape as it is. But there are programs for anybody, and especially those who don't get any relief from medication, such as intensive outpatient therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. There's ketamine, which is very expensive. There are all of these modalities you can use to get better. And I would say, and I've learned most of this from my group because I never had to experience any of these things, but a lot of my group has, and it really helps if you'll do it. But most people don't know about it because if they're not going to a therapist, where are they going to hear about it?
Yeah. And just the value of being in a group, of being with like-minded souls who know what it's like to be on that journey, to be experiencing these thoughts and actions that you can't easily put to words. That must be of a huge benefit as well, and just knowing that you're accepted exactly as you are.
You can't imagine how many people come into my groups and says, I never knew there were people like me out there. I thought I was all on my own. And our groups give them a chance to realize that there's a lot of people suffering the way they do, and they become friends. And they get on websites or they get on Discord, if you know what that is, and
Yes,
they talk about all the things, and they learn this from the groups. And by the way, when we're talking about groups, I should let people know that there are groups everywhere, not just mine or a few people like me. They're everywhere. They're in your community. And that holds, as far as I can tell, for just about every country in the world, except for some that are really backward, maybe. But get online, look up mental health group therapy, and you'll find somebody in your neighborhood, and you can just become a member. My groups cost nothing. There are other groups that they charge. I know nothing about them or why they charge or how much, but mine are free.
Yeah. I think you're doing a great service there for people, seriously, because like you say, just them knowing that they're not alone
Yeah,
with whatever they're
makes
going
a big
through
difference.
just must be huge. And I bet you wished that you had that early on in your journey as well.
Yeah, when I was involved at the worst time of my life, it was the dark ages for mental health. I don't know what anything was like in the 1800s or anything like that, but when in the mid 50s and 60s and 70s, it was pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very solo,
Yeah,
isolating, silent journey, wasn't it?
correct. So
Alrighty.
if I
Yep.
would say one thing that I didn't get to take advantage of, but if you find yourself in a mental illness and the first thing I would do is find a support group. Now, not meaning a group like mine, but meaning a group of people that can help you mentally get through this just by being there for you and being nice and questioning what you're going through. That's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because, yeah, hopefully somebody listening, even with struggling with grief and feeling down and depressed and anxious and like that, again, reach out to a group,
Right.
be with people like-minded so you're not alone going through this. Maybe some things won't work for you, but there may be something else that you haven't even considered
Right.
that you hear about that then really makes a difference. Sorry, I'm just collapsing our whole setup here.
No
But that's
problem.
okay. We're nearly finished. Hey, Steve, I'd like to finish off with a couple of questions that I ask everyone. So, what is
Mhm.
the best thing that has happened to you so far today?
What I do today? I haven't done anything. I'm retired, so most of my days I
Thing.
got up and got the wax out of my ears so I could hear better. I wear hearing aids, and the wax builds up in them, and then I really can't hear. So this morning I got it all taken out.
That's a pretty good thing to have. What is something that you are most grateful for?
I would say the most grateful thing is my wife and my kids and my friends.
Definitely. That's when everything else goes, what have you got? You've
Hmm.
got your
Hmm.
family and friends, yes. When you have moments in your day that are not going so well now, how do you manage those?
When they come, and they don't come very often now, but a couple of weeks ago I had a couple of days that were like that. I do what a lot of people do who suffer from depression or bipolar. I get in bed and just lay there. And that isn't the thing I should be doing. But on those days, it's just too hard to navigate normal life. And a lot of the times when I've been bad, don't feel like watching TV, don't feel like reading, I just veg.
Yeah,
And those
because
days
it's
do come, not very
yeah.
often, but they do come. And um, everybody's going to have them who's going through this for the rest of their life.
And it's just allowing you to have the self-care that you need, what works for you, without feeling guilty about that as well, because there is a lot of guilt around people putting themselves to bed when they should be out doing something and being productive. But I think, yeah, taking time out is very important when you know you're not coping well.
Yeah. Now, it isn't because I make this choice to run and jump into bed because I have to.
Yes, yes, I understand that. So we're going to have the links in the episode notes as well as your bio
Okay.
for your social media, and also the link to your book, Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey, which I really encourage our listeners to go and grab a copy of. It's a really good value read. What you share in that is like really enlightening, and I'm really grateful that you did take the time to write
Thank you.
this book,
It
Steve,
is an
because
easy read. It's only
yeah,
120 pages long.
yeah,
So there's nothing in it about medical stuff. It's
mm,
all just my life. I don't give
yeah,
you any things that you're going to go, what the hell is that?
yeah.
So it is pretty easy.
Yeah, no, it's a good read. I certainly enjoyed reading it. And that is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with as a parting comment?
I hope people will try to get over the stigma of mental illness because it is very much a part of all our lives. It affects everybody one way or another. And we've got to beat that stigma so we can get more resources to get it taken care of. And then the other thing I want to tell everybody who is suffering from mental illness, you can get better. You're not going to beat it totally. It's incurable. But you can still have a good life. But you've got to follow the prescriptions and the advice of the professionals who are working with you.
That's really good advice. Steve, I'm going to let you go off and have your swim now, but I'd like to
Thanks,
let you
Ellen.
know. Yeah, but I'd like to let you know that I am so grateful for the time you've spent with me today, sharing this information, also for the fabulous work that you're doing with your groups, and just for sharing your incredible journey with us. So, Steve, thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Have a good one.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. If there's a topic you'd like covered, click on the beautifulsideofgrief@gmail.com link, or go into the beautifulsideofgrief.com website, where you can also leave a review. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button. And if you know of somebody who could benefit from this episode, please share. And until next time, please be kind to you and take good care.